Whenever I make these box art videos, I really like picking apart every little thing, but I hope this doesn't lead people to believe that I think good box art is always super complex. For me, it's all about the feeling you're able to convey through the artwork, and that can be achieved through dizzying amounts of detail or clean minimalistic design. And when I think of minimalism at its finest, there's no better example than the Japanese box art for the Final Fantasy series. Ever since the debut of Final Fantasy back in 1987, the boxes have featured artwork drawn by freelance artist Yoshitaka Amano. Of course, all the original covers were replaced overseas by more market-friendly artwork. However, Final Fantasy IV's cover would introduce a piece of design that would eventually find its way over to the West, and become a staple in the series for many years to come: the Final Fantasy logo. A near monochromatic piece of art designed by Amano himself that meshes into the now iconic Final Fantasy font. In the beginning, the logos were there to accompany a larger piece of artwork, but over time, the boxes would be simplified down to just the title and logo over a white background. Many re-releases of previous games would also follow this style. Over in the West, we still got localized market-friendly versions, but the Amano logos were still present. I talk a lot about emotion in box art, and that's exactly what these works are. Pure emotion. When Amano gets commissioned to do these logos, most of the time, the games are still very early in development. Instead of receiving character designs and visual reference to go by, all he gets are general details about the story and characters. From there, Amano creates a piece that tries to capture the idea of the Final Fantasy he's being commissioned for. The end result is compelling, one way or another. Sometimes you can't even make out exactly what you're looking at, but it's the shapes, the brush strokes, and the few pieces of imagery he chooses to include that emanates some sort of vibe for each title. From the beautiful flowing waves of Final Fantasy X, to the mechanically driven Final Fantasy VI, to the elegant yet sporadic crystals of Final Fantasy XIII. They all symbolize a core aspect of each game. They're good, is what I'm trying to say. Like, are we looking at the same thing here? Like, look at that. Look at that. If there's anything that really embodies Square's disconnect from their Final Fantasy roots, it's their shift away from their own iconic branding, making Final Fantasy XIII Lightning Returns be the first mainline title in the entire series to not feature art by Amano, even in Japan. The logo did return for Final Fantasy XV, probably because it was created over a decade ago, back when the game was still 13 verses, but was omitted in the Western release. This is super sad to me because I think these logos really tie the series together. Final Fantasy is ever changing, and each title is only loosely connected, but the logos do a great job at making each game feel like it's part of a greater anthology. For me, the way they branded Lightning Returns makes it feel like a complete outlier. But hey, maybe that's what they wanted. I only hope that the Amano logo returns for Final Fantasy XVI. I guess we'll only know whenever that game gets announced. Is what I would say if I was a bozo. Because while I was making this video, Final Fantasy XVI got a trailer. And at the end of the trailer came that beautiful Amano illustration. Two entities locking eyes in a fierce and intimate battle, their bodies circling around the Final Fantasy title, as if their conflict will envelop the very fantasy itself. Now, Square Enix, I know what you want to do. You either want to put two of the main characters facing each other with stern faces on the cover, or you want to splice the two faces together facing the viewer. Both of those would be fine, but you already have this extremely beautiful representation of both of those concepts. You could just pull the alpha move and do the logo with the white background again. It would look really pretty with the white PS5 banner.